This is a good throwback. We did a version of this last year. I'm excited to do a 2024 version. A lot of things have changed. A lot of new exciting ideas. A lot of new memes. So I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. We have about 20 minutes. We're going to cover a few things, especially kind of interesting ideas. And the thing I want to kind of start off with is ask both of you, how do you think about the future of blockchain scalability? We've seen so much incredible things happen in the last 12 months. New L2s that have just stormed everybody and taken over block space. We didn't expect the timelines. We've seen incredible innovation, way much effort into making things cheaper. What do you think this leads to, and how do you think this gets better? And I'll probably start with Sandeep.
On blockchains, the execution part, like I tend to see them in the execution versus settlement layers instead of L1, L2s. And on the execution side, where you can execute the code, the environment or the ecosystem keeps on changing very fast. In the last 12 months, we have completely like relatively new entrants in terms of the mass developer usage. Like Base is there, Solana is there, many other blockchains are also coming up. So execution environment keeps changing. The settlement layers take a lot of time to bake in, Ethereum, Bitcoin can also become, and it's fastly becoming settlement layer with Opcat. It can become a formidable settlement layer. Yeah. So on execution side, things keep on changing, and for example, I believe that the execution environments are going to be capturing very less value, because except like one scenario which I'll come to, otherwise execution environments are just like these open source operating systems for me, like your Red Hat, Unix, Linux, those of the word, because people will be able to simply take them and launch them, and then make their own chains and have ZK proofs, and then settle into a settlement layer. And then for that you need a faster settlement layer. Especially at Polygon side, like I can say that we have actually started descaling from the execution environments. And then we are more focused on cross-chain settlement, which is the AG layer, and then which actually provides a fast settlement and then gives a hard settlement on Ethereum. So that's where we are going. And I think execution environments, we have seen a lot of iterations. I think last few iterations are coming in, like you will have Monad, then you will have Maiden, which is in the Polygon ecosystem, and maybe one or two more L1s. But I think most of the execution environments we have mostly seen. And next set of execution environments would be focused on ZK itself, where you don't even need the chain. Why do you need the chain and a block explorer and all of this? Probably you will have very, very simple execution environments, which quickly can move into the use case specific execution and then prove them with ZK. Like ZK VMs actually are also going to change the execution environments a lot.
So is that betting on the fact that we right now for a little bit more longer, we'll see hundreds of thousands of new L2 chains, but long term, you expect them to just consolidate? Or are you saying that this is the only way thousands of chains can exist?
Yeah. I'm saying that the future I see is thousands and thousands and thousands, or probably millions of these chains, just like we have Web2 servers. And we will have the one thing I said, that we will have few chains which will have high liquidity, which I agree with Anatoly from Solana, for example, on that part, that there will be few hotspots. But I still need to see whether those hotspot will be these generic public chains, or somebody like Hyperliquid or somebody will build a DEX specific chain, and that DEX becomes the highest liquidity, and that is the hotspot. That remains to be seen. But otherwise, that's how I feel. Yeah, that there will be millions of chains.
Juan, how do you think about this?
I strongly agree with that perspective. I think I've thought this for many, many years. We're going to have, thousands to millions of chains. When we think about what constitutes a chain, that is going to get easier and simpler and simpler and simpler. When you think about something like a Google document today, that underneath the hood is implemented by a thing called an operational transform, or in other systems, CRDTs, where you have a log of events. And so if you think of that and just add hash linking, most of the infrastructure today in Web 2 already operates with these kinds of causality primitives. If you just move that into the world of blockchains, we are going to end up with thousands of millions of different chains and systems, and they're going to interop across a wide variety of structures. What's going to be missing, though, is making the calling conventions between all of these as easy as possible, with very fast finality. Without today bridges are really risky. So part of that is aggregation, part of that is like the CKVMs to be able to prove certain things. And so I do think that we'll see execution environments that look more like the Web 2 world, where you have a vast landscape of very different like components, but you have hardware viability and no double spending across that environment.
How does a Filecoin ecosystem fit into this world?
So we've been building two sets of primitives for this. One is at the end of the day, all this computation is going to need to be able to store the code to run the program, store the data that goes into the programs, and so on. So from that perspective, you want the massive scale storage network that is Filecoin to support all of these thousands to millions of chains. And so building good primitives for building those chains directly on Filecoin is like a good component, or using Filecoin primitives for the storage of the data. And then the second is a scalability primitive that we call IPC, Interplanetary Consensus, which is a framework for building just recursive chains as deep as you want to go. So L2, L3, L4, L10 if you want. And building the facilities of being able to do calling across this very large tree of possible chains. One of the things you get out of this tree of chains is that you can make finality much, much faster. You can have a blockchain that only occupies, say, a single data center. And so that way your block time could be milliseconds, 10 millisecond block times. And so that's how you can run really fast, financial transactions that, you want to be able to clear in milliseconds, not in seconds.
I think we're going to add on something.
No, that was very good. Very nice.
Because I'm going to change topics. Let's talk about AI agents. Excited about it? You think it's a fad? Do you think there's something here? What are the possibilities, and kind of how do we think about AI agents and them interacting with crypto?
So, look, I think it's clear now to a lot of people that the AI models that we're building are extremely intelligent. And 10 years ago, when I used to tell people that AGI was, in 10, 20, 30 years away at most, people thought I was crazy. Today, that's a much more accepted view, and people are getting ready for these models, like replacing vast swaths of what people do today. Some of them are being called coworkers already. Like we're nearing that level of intelligence. That's only going to get stronger in the next 2, 4, 10 years. And so what we're going to end up with is a landscape where you have AI models, AI systems that have the same level of capabilities as humans in terms of knowledge work. And then we're going to end up with embodied agents. So like, robotics is around the corner. So the next few years, it's an exploration of how do you enable AI models to interact with the rest of the world? How do you enable them to have their own agency? How do you enable them to have the ability to enter into contracts with other parties? How do you enable them to have property, to have funding, to be able to pay people? When is the first AI agent that's going to legitimately hire another party through a contract, right? Today, we've seen things like Truth Terminal pseudo-hiring people to do things, but we're going to eventually have like AI organizations, like organizations where each of the individual parties that are members of that organization are fully AI models or humans that are plugged in together to operate together. And so we're going to explore that landscape over the next 2 to 3 years. And crypto is probably the best place to do that because it enables you, it's portable money, international by default, and then you have hardware verifiability on the operations. Like you can't go back and change the state. And so that's an extremely good ground to do this exploration. So I do think that AI agents is going to, and here agents, I don't mean like the workflow replacements that we've seen in the last 2 years. I truly mean agents with wallets, with the ability to cause things to happen in the world, with objective functions and whatnot. And that can have all kinds of downsides that we'll probably get to in a moment. But this landscape is a way to try and capture the upside, that enable the possible good things that can come from this. And second, figure out what guardrails we need to avoid really bad outcomes so that we can explore this landscape before the models get too smart. You don't want to do this kind of discovery 5 or 10 years from now when the models are way smarter than humans. You want to do this now while the models are not as smart as humans.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good description about these agents. I mean, I do agree that, in the larger world, agents are going to be the thing. Most of the things AI, fully AI agent-based organizations, and all those things. In crypto, when you asked agent immediately, because there's too much of these AI agent tokens these days. And I don't know, I want to ask you two basically that what do you guys think? Is it another meme coin, or maybe 5%, some fundamental there, and then it is nothing different than meme coin mania only, or what you just now said is like, okay, I thought that, okay, all of this is experimentation to learn the real stuff. So, okay, like some of these like are launching tokens and there's speculation coming into this. But otherwise, like right now, these agents and AI agent tokens look similar to meme coins to me. What do you guys?
Yeah, I think in a way what you described is where you would like the world to go to. But the question becomes, is this what we're actually seeing now? Or is it like, or is this an excuse to say, let's just launch a meme coin that does like the hello world example, and maybe we'll do some learnings, but that's not the actual true intent to get there.
I mean, I think the reason why Truth Terminal dropped a meme coin and didn't do something else more valuable is because Truth Terminal figured out that the fastest way to make a bunch of money in crypto is with a meme coin. And that's more of a reflection of how bad the industry is rewarding good impact than a reflection on whether these models are just meme coins. These models are going to be doing what is most efficient and successful for them. So, like that's more of like a criticism on like what our industry is doing. Like our industry needs to be able to like greatly increase the reward for truly producing large scale impact in the long term. Like I think the Silicon Valley world and the Web2 world really focused on that hard. Like you had a very, very competitive landscape where if you weren't truly delivering impact at scale in the long term, you got blown out. Like tons of companies that got to like $1 billion, $10 billion scale valuations were wiped out way before they hit IPOs or even at IPOs because they weren't actually providing that much value to the world. And so today in crypto, like we don't have that competitive of a landscape. Like there's high competition, but a lot of it is noise, and a lot of the noise can stay in this bubbly environment for a long time. And so I think
maybe just to confirm that is a function of immediate liquidity over anything else, the way I see it, because when you describe the startup world, you kind of have binary outcomes. If you
Yeah, I actually think it's because the industry is too small. Like if the industry was 10 to 100 times bigger, then you would have massive scale hedge funds taking your money. Like the reason why you have this level of irrational exuberance sustained is that you don't have the large players wiping you out. Yeah. Because large players don't play in crypto. Like the large players are trading crazy exotic derivatives at the level of like, tens to hundreds of billions at a time.
Right, but I think that's an apples to oranges comparison, because that's not how a startup world behaves, because you actually have privatization of your businesses and you don't actually have incentive to actually anyone extract to deliver value.
Yeah, your point about the liquidity, like I do think that you can create so it is true that early liquidity enables this potential problem, but I do think that you can create early liquidity environments that are closer connected to impact if you have just a harsher.
Which is fair. And that's kind of how everything started in this space, and that's kind of how we fund a lot of the research.
Yeah. I mean, this discussion, basically you saying that, there is like some, because I had not paid a lot of attention, but a lot of people came to me that, oh, like I'm, buying these AI meme coins or whatever. And I kind of ignored it. But what you just now said that, in future, these fully AI based organizations can exist and they will have these like transactions happening between AI and AI, and this basically, you can basically be okay with this. Like I can now be okay with this, like this experimentation to figure out like these, transaction mechanisms and all those, kind of crazy scenarios at a much micro scale.
It's a playground because it's okay to things go wrong now, but you don't want
yeah.
When you GPT-11,
I'm right now a little bit okay with those meme guys. Otherwise, I was like, what are you doing, guys? But like, I'm a little bit okay with that.
No, it's
after hearing you.
From an AI, safety guardrails perspective, like there's been a long-standing tradition of being very worried about equipping AI agents with money because suddenly they can start hiring people to do like very nefarious things. But the problem is like if we don't figure out how to enable AI agents to interact with humans now while they're dumb, like we're gonna have a really bad time when they gain that capability and are incredibly brilliant, right? And so like we have some period of time now to try and figure out what are the right guardrails globally to couple with AI agents. What does it mean for an AI agent to be a person and have legal rights and have property and be able to transact, and what jurisdiction should they be in, and all of that. That we have to figure out over the next 2 to 3 years. And if we do that now, we'll be in a much better position for the following 5.
Yeah. I have a different question, but we have less time. So, okay, I'll ask you off stage then. Otherwise, I was going to ask that, what do you think that, because you've been in the AI space before, right? So, like, we keep saying that the AGI is coming and all those things, right? Like, so many startups have been funded. But recently, like, even Ilya, OpenAI, like, who opened this safety, this thing, and some other scientists have also said that LLMs are reaching a kind of a plateau in terms of how intelligent they can be, just based on the data. Like, you can't give them more data and expect them to be more smarter. And that's Jan LeCun from Meta. He's like for quite some time saying that, this is probably the LLMs that, as good as they can get. And they are not going to be AGI. AGI might come still, but we will have to discover a new set of algorithms. And one could also argue in the zoomed out version of AI that we had so many algorithms. This was one algorithm which broke out and became, 100x or 1000x smarter, but is still like probably 2-3 orders of magnitude away from real intelligence.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people that think it's going to take a lot longer are just wrong, and here's why. And here I don't mean that it's going to happen in 2 or 3 years. What I mean is that most good predictions about this were done 10 to 20 years ago. 10 to 20 years ago, potentially even longer. People figured out that because of how computers work and the increasing, because of Moore's law and the density increase in the transistor count, you would end up having the capability of having a computing system at the scale of the human brain within a certain amount of time. So you could plot out Moore's law over decades, and you could see at what point it crossed the threshold of human level computation. And once you have the level of hardware to be able to do this, then it's just primarily a software problem of finding what are the right algorithms to be able to support to create that. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, the algorithms take time. It takes many years to get there and so on. In reality, it hasn't happened that way. When you look at the history of AI development over the last 10 to 20 years, as soon as you got the right level of hardware to enable that level of capability, you got those results within 1 to 2 years, because there are thousands to hundreds of thousands of people sampling the very large space of algorithms to be able to find the right solutions. So my sense is whether or not LLMs right now are plateauing, there are so many people working on this problem with so much capital, and the potential gains are so big that already we are going to be maxing out the level of capability that we have in the hardware. And this is primarily just continuing to do the acceleration of returns on hardware, of course, coupling with data and coupling with algorithms to be able to translate that hardware into the right power. But that only buys you 2 to 5 years of delay. It does not buy you 50 years of delay, right? It's a very big difference. And so that means that we are likely to get AGI in the timelines that Kurzweil and others predicted 10, 20 years ago. Kurzweil, Bostrom, Sandberg, and others modeled out that within by between 2030 and 2045, we would very likely have AGI and ASI, and we're very much on track for that. So I don't know whether we're going to get it, in 2 years, like the way that Sam and others are predicting, but I know that we'll definitely get it by 30, 35.
In this case, even a 10-year variance is still acceptable because it's still a guaranteed eventuality. Right?
Yeah, we're talking about summoning aliens, right? Alien intelligences that are incredibly powerful. 5 to 10 years, doesn't matter. What?
It's 2040, 2050, you still get it, and it doesn't change the outcome.
But that's an interesting thing that you are saying, that this is, instead of a software problem, there's a hardware problem, right? What you are saying essentially, and that's an interesting thought process. But one part of me says that if this is a hardware problem, then hardware has the limits of physics. But then you can also say that the same limits of physics human brain also has.
We get parallelism that we get to implement because we now have software optimizations and also hardware optimizations, right? I think that's kind of the phase we're at, which is you actually can go vertical instead of horizontal and mix and match. And we don't know what the capabilities of the maxing out is when you get to that level.
Yeah. And also about this hardware theory, if you combine the computation of this horizontally scaled computers we already have, these are essentially supercomputers like the Elon Musk, this thing. So those are already much beyond human brain capabilities, right? In terms of computation.
Not really.
No,
that's the model.
That's fast.
I'm saying not in terms of flops in general, but yeah.
Yeah, not in terms of flops.
You have to measure backprop.
Yeah,
your head.
it really depends. Exactly. It really depends on what level of fidelity you're trying to emulate in the brain. Like, does a neuron, are you going to represent a neuron with 1 transistor or 1,000 transistors? And at that scale, like, there's a really good graph on this that I tend to show in a bunch of places, and I'll show it later, that shows a plot of the flop count of like the top supercomputers growing over time. And then the different thresholds of different models of the human brain of like, when are we going to hit those? And so, sure, in aggregate total compute, in terms of all of the silicon that we've built over the last years, have we matched the human brain? Yes, in terms of the total transistor count, but it's not all in the same place, and it's not all able to like wire together really quickly. And so what matters more is like single data center level scale of compute, and that single data center level scale of compute has not reached like a neural network arrangement capable of being larger than the human brain. Like, we haven't hit that. We're going to hit that probably in about 7 to 10 years ish, maybe sooner. But part of the problem and why we're likely going to get AGI sooner is that LLMs are showing that you can be quite efficient with neural networks. Like, artificial neural networks are, in some regards, being more efficient than the brain in certain types of jobs. And certainly the human brain is doing a lot, which is just operating the body. And so you can remove all of that in an artificial neural network. So you don't actually get to need to be as big as a human brain, which is why we're seeing the possibility of 2027 and 2032 being likely, is because we don't need to like get to the whole scale of the brain.
Yeah. I want to change some topics so we can wrap things up. There's a lot of people here who are builders trying to think about starting companies, thinking about scaling their businesses and kind of doing more global expansions. How do you think about the world of startups and capital nowadays, and any advice you want to give to people in the audience on how to take advantage of what's going on now?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of very practical advice as to what the builders should do now, it depends on like which stage you are. Like, let's say you are a startup and you are already working on your startup for, let's say, more than 6 months, and you have a MVP or something. I think you are in a very, very good spot. And in next 6 to 12 months, the bar to raise money will be much, much lower. So you will be able to raise funds, and then you can have resources to realize your vision. So that's one category. The other category is like, let's say you are already working in startups who are close to their TGE, and I think the bull market might stay like 1.5 years. Like, if you see last cycle,
It's a bold prediction.
no. I'm just matching that. In 2022, if you see that the 3AC crash came around 2022 March. So if you see from the year of halvening, this is like 1 year and 3 months. So let's say this is we are still in the year of halvening.
That's the window of total collapse of 90% down. That
was one short collapse, like 70-80% market going down in like 1 month. But before that also, and even after that, BTC again climbed back to 65K one more time. All the 2-3 times BTC climbed back. So my point is, like, you will have like good 12 to 15 months from now. If you are, as I said, like, if you're already building something to raise funds, and if you are already in a company which is close to TGE, probably you will be able to, in next 3 to 6 months, you should be able to work there and then, get your first vestings and all that. And I'm talking like purely from people who want to be founders. So if you can get like one vesting and you can make like, few 100K with that vesting, hopefully your startup does really well, then you have a good base to start your startup, right? Like, and then you can experiment more in the next bear cycle, build and stuff like that. So that would be my advice, like, for these two types of people who are there. And yeah, like, obviously if you are building for more than 6 months, you should be in a place to launch the TG. So it's generally good for people.
Yeah, I agree with that perspective. I would maybe say that my sense on the bull market is that kind of Q2, Q3 is probably when we'll start seeing the I don't know if a turn down at that point, but I think if you're running a company or you're working in a company that is going to try and leverage the bull market, really target like Q2 or like end of Q1 through maybe beginning of Q3 as like a moment in time when you want to do your launches, your fundraising, and all that kind of stuff. And you need to be swimming as hard as you possibly can towards that wave now, because the wave is already going and you want to catch it and ride and surf it. And if you don't raise in next year, you may be in a position where the market is a lot lower in 2026. And unfortunately, this cyclicality, which drops out of Bitcoin and drops out of liquidity cycles and macro and so on, is kind of a pain point in our industry. But as a founder, you have to factor it into your planning. Like you have to raise when it's kind of like the I think totally has this perspective of the Trisolaran crisis model. It's you have this nice summer environment, everything grows, and then harsh winters, and you have to raise and capitalize during the summers to be able to support your team through the winters. It's just very different than the traditional Silicon Valley startup world, where it's just kind of continuous as it goes, and it only is subjected to macro winters like the 2008 crisis or 2001 or whatever. This is a much more frequent cycle, and so you have to factor it into the lifetime of your company. I would say that there are nowadays a lot of tools in the crypto ecosystem to support that. There's ways of there's many. But there's both probably good funding systems and a lot of VC or accelerators and whatnot that already plan this liquidity cycle as well and do invest with the troughs, but just kind of understand that is going to impact you in different ways in valuations and projects and whatnot. So again, swim towards the wave, ride it, and make sure that you have the capital to survive the winter. I do think that the best advice, if you're not already building a thing, you should join a thing that is amazing and help it be as successful as possible over the next year and capitalize on that to then be able to have the capital to build your own next thing.
Yeah. But as we were discussing, this is NFA and DYOR.
And if you don't know what those two acronyms mean, or NGMI. Juan, Sandeep, thank you so much for the amazing conversation, and hopefully you got to learn some cool things.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.